If we're emotionally detached, we do nothing. When we're emotionally detached, we don't care. This is why we're all talking about what's going on in the world now, is because we are finally becoming emotionally attached. It's possible we're finally becoming emotionally attached to other people's pain, or emotionally attached to other people's ideology or other people's ways of thinking. As long as we're emotionally detached, we just move on. Doesn't really matter what other people are doing. I don't really care. Or we'll even maybe say, well, it doesn't affect me, and so I'm not going to get attached to that. And that's fair enough. Why would we be emotionally upset about what doesn't affect us, where we're not involved? And we should definitely be emotionally attached when it does affect us. Sometimes we get accused of being biased. You know, like, oh, you only care about this, but you don't care about that, as if that's a problem. That's human nature. Listen, I'm glad I'm glad you have what you have, but I don't get as emotionally attached to what you have as I do to what I have. All right? I don't get as emotionally attached to your kid as I do my kid. I mean, it doesn't mean I don't love your kid, or I don't honor them, or I don't respect them, or I don't appreciate them, but I'm not going to feel the same way about them that you feel about them, and I'm not going to ask you to feel the same way about yours that I feel about mine. Why? Because they belong to me. I have a physical, emotional, spiritual, soulish attachment, and so my emotions are going to rotate around that. So don't feel bad because you don't feel the emotion someone wants you to over an area. We feel to what we're closely attached to. So Cain needs to do some inventory, and we talked last night about how self-inventory is not a bad thing. It's not anti-grace to take self-inventory. It's anti-grace to take a self-inventory that leads you into self-righteousness, or that leads you away from your identity, or that leads you into thinking your salvation is somehow attached to what you do or what you say. Or no, all of that's in his hands. But my self-inventory might tell me where I am in life and what to do with it. And so the question, why are you angry, is so that you will know your emotions, why they exist, and that you'll be able to own them. And how many of you realize that if you know why they exist and you own them, you might be able to avoid the catastrophe coming up? Cain is about to kill his brother. He doesn't know that yet. We don't know that yet as we're reading. We know it because we've read it 1,000 times. But if you were reading this for the first time, being told, watching this movie, you don't know Abel's about to die, but that anger's about to go to seed and turn into something sinister and dark. It's not so bad yet. It's just anger. That's right. It's just anger. But the potential for it to be way more than anger is right on the surface. In fact, it's so close that God tells Cain, if you do well, you'll be accepted. If not, sin lies at your door. And your destiny, Cain, is to rule over it. Your anger's about to cause that sin to bite you. Your destiny is to rule over it. This is a big reason why, and I don't want to get into a theological can of worms, but I might as well speak the truth as I see it. This is a big reason why I don't really buy the idea of original sin, that every man is born a sinner. I believe you did enough to sin on your own to be a sinner. And I don't see Cain having sin in him. I see Cain having sin next to him. God doesn't say to Cain, sin is in you, and we're going to have to take it out. God says to Cain, sin is next to you, and you're supposed to dominate it, but you're not if you stay in this state. And so I think the family of man, it's not a matter, because what happened with and I'm getting into it and didn't want to. Well, I got to say this, because this is the question that pops up in everybody. What happened in theology is once we accepted the idea of original sin, then we had everybody, all those little precious little chubby cheek toddlers, those little guys were just going to go burn in hell unless they got saved. And then we literally created the theology of age of accountability. We come up with the idea that, well, they're covered by grace until they get to a place where they can say no to Jesus. And my thought growing up was, well, why don't we keep them ignorant as long as we possibly can? Let's don't even have Sunday school and youth meeting, because let's just let them be ignorant, because that way they never reach the age of accountability. They never get to a place where they say no, and maybe they just slide into eternity already covered underneath the grace that apparently babies get, but people that never meet Jesus don't get. Okay, now that's enough of that. That's too deep a theology for Sunday morning. We're going to leave that alone. But what I see is the reality in this story, whether my theology's on or off, let's not worry about that. Because What I do see in the story is that sin's outside of Cain. And God says to Cain, the potential to mess up's laying right there. You're supposed to rule over it, but it's trying to rule over you. That's God's way of saying, check your anger, because your anger is about to do something you don't want to do and turn you into something you don't want to be and create something you can't stop and destroy you in a way you can't come back from. So your emotions are important. They're not wrong, but they need to be investigated. They need to be looked at. They need to be taken serious.